Do you know what your car has been doing since the moment you drove it off the lot, while you were just thinking about the new car smell and the feeling of a clean dashboard? Somewhere behind that dashboard, on almost every new car sold in Australia today, there's a small piece of hardware quietly building a file. Where you go when you leave the house, how hard you brake, the exact minute you pull into your GP's car park, your church, your ex-partner's street. And here's the part almost nobody watching this knows. That file doesn't stay in the car. It leaves, automatically, every day, to companies you've never heard of. And from there, it can reach your insurer, a data broker, or an Australian police officer, without a knock on your door and without you ever finding out it happened. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what your car is collecting, where Australian law actually lets that data go, the real tool police here use to pull it straight out of your dashboard, and the one sentence to say if an officer ever wants to plug something into your car. Quick word before we get into it. No invented authority on this channel. Just plain English Australian law, checked against the actual statutes. Every section sitting in the description below. Here's what's actually sitting behind your dashboard. The industry calls it a telematics control unit. Think of it as a phone built permanently into your car, one you can't hang up and can't switch off, with its own data connection running, whether the car is moving or parked in your driveway at 3 in the morning. What does it record? Your exact location, tracked the same way your phone's GPS tracks you. Your speed. Every hard brake, every sharp turn, every route, and the time you took it. How long you sat somewhere. Whether your seatbelt was on. Some systems log calls and messages from a phone you've ever connected to the car, even after you've disconnected it. This isn't an aftermarket gadget someone slipped under your bumper. It's built in by the manufacturer, switched on the day you drove away, and in most cases, you agreed to it somewhere in the pile of paperwork at the dealership without ever reading the clause that mattered. In 2023, the Mozilla Foundation studied the privacy practices of 25 major car brands, the same brands sold on Australian roads: Ford, Toyota, Honda, Kia, Nissan, and the rest. Every single one failed. Mozilla called cars the worst product category for privacy they'd reviewed in 7 years of doing this work. Worse than smart TVs, worse than phone apps, worse than the speaker on your kitchen counter. More than half of those brands stated in their own privacy policies that they could hand your data to government or law enforcement in response to a simple request. Not necessarily a warrant, not necessarily a court order, sometimes just a formal ask through the right channel. Here's why that clause actually works in Australia, and it's worth understanding precisely, because the mechanism is different to what you might have heard about overseas. Under the Privacy Act 1988 and the Australian Privacy Principles, organizations are generally required to protect your personal information and only use it for the purpose it was collected for. But Australian Privacy Principle 6 carves out a specific exception. A company can disclose your personal information without your consent if it reasonably believes the disclosure is necessary for an enforcement-related activity conducted by an enforcement body, which includes state and federal police. That exception doesn't require a warrant. It requires the company to reasonably believe the request is legitimate and hand the data over. That's the clause doing the same job in Australia that the American version of this video points to in the United States. A different law, the same practical outcome. Your driving data reaching police through your car manufacturer's own privacy policy rather than through your front door. Now, insurance is a separate front entirely, and it works the way you'd expect once you know the data exists at all. If your car maker shares driving behavior data with a broker or directly with insurers, hard braking events, speeding patterns, late-night trips, that data can factor into premium calculations and claims decisions without you ever being told which specific trip or which specific habit moved the number. You don't need to have done anything wrong for the record to exist. It just keeps a record, and a record can always be used against you later, in a context you never agreed to when you signed on at the dealership. So where does the police side of this actually sit under Australian law? This is the part I want to be precise about, because it's genuinely more complicated here than a single American Supreme Court case, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Australia doesn't have a constitutional right against unreasonable search the way the United States does. There's no direct equivalent to the Fourth Amendment sitting above every statute. What protects you instead is a patchwork of specific search powers, mainly under LEPRA in New South Wales and its equivalents elsewhere, which this channel has already walked through in earlier videos. Reasonable suspicion, genuine grounds, or your own consent. Extracting data from a car's infotainment system through a physical device, rather than simply looking through the vehicle by eye, sits in a genuinely unsettled corner of that law. It's the same corner where searching a mobile phone found during a lawful search sits. Courts have generally required that accessing the data on a device needs its own specific justification, not just a general power to look inside the car itself. But there's no single, clean Australian ruling yet that draws the exact line around telematics extraction the way this channel would want to point you to. What is settled and confirmed is that the tool exists and operates here. A company called Burla makes vehicle forensic software that plugs directly into a car's infotainment and telematics systems and pulls out location history, routes, stops, and in many cases phone data that was ever synced to the car. Contacts, call logs, text messages. Even if the phone itself is locked, password protected, or not even in the car anymore. Reporting on Australian police forensics confirms agencies here use exactly this kind of vehicle data extraction as a standard investigative tool, the same technology used by law enforcement overseas. Your locked phone protects nothing if your car kept its own copy of what was on it. Now, the mistakes people make with this, because they're specific to a threat most drivers have simply never thought about. Error 1. Assuming a locked phone is the end of the privacy conversation. It isn't, if that phone was ever paired to the car's Bluetooth or USB system. The car may hold its own separate copy of contacts, call logs, and messages, sitting in the dashboard rather than in your pocket, with none of the password protection you assumed covered all of it. Error 2. Treating the manufacturer's privacy settings as a formality skimmed through at the dealership and never revisited. The driver program, the safe driving score, the data sharing toggle. These sit in your car's app or online account, and in most cases, they're switched on by default, sometimes by a dealership staff member ticking a box while you were signing 40 other pages. Error 3. Never checking what happens to your data when you sell, trade in, or return a leased car. If your phone was ever paired to that vehicle, the next owner, or an investigator working an unrelated matter involving that car, potentially inherits your contact list and message history unless you've actively cleared it first. So here's what to actually do, starting tonight. And none of it requires technical expertise. Step 1. Open your car's app or your online account and find the privacy or data sharing settings. Look for anything called a driver program, a safe driving score, or data sharing with third parties, and switch it off. If there's an option to limit data collection to what's strictly required for the vehicle to function, select it. Step 2. Use your rights under the Privacy Act. You can request access to the personal information a company holds about you under Australian Privacy Principle 12, and you can ask your car manufacturer directly what data they've collected and who they've shared it with. If a company won't answer, or you believe it's mishandled your data, you can lodge a complaint with the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, the OAIC, which is the regulator that actually enforces these principles. Step 3. Clear your car's memory. Go into the infotainment system, find the list of paired Bluetooth devices, and delete every one of them. Look for an option to clear personal data, contacts, and call history stored in the car itself. Do this before you sell, trade in, or return any vehicle, not after. Step 4. Be deliberate about what you sync going forward. Every time the car asks whether you want to share contacts, the safe default answer is no, unless you specifically need that feature. The more you sync, the more the car keeps, independent of anything happening on your phone. A word of caution, because this channel won't tell you to do something that could put you at risk. You may have heard people online talk about physically disconnecting the telematics modem or pulling a fuse. Don't. Disabling that hardware can also disable features like automatic crash notification, and it can void your warranty. The settings, the access requests, and clearing the car's memory get you most of the way there without putting you at risk on the side of a road. Now, the part that matters most if an officer is standing at your window wanting more than just a look through the glass. If police want to plug a device into your car's systems or ask you to unlock a screen so they can look through its data, here's the phrase: I don't consent to you accessing my car's data or systems. If there's a specific power for this, please name it. Say it again, slower, because the second pass is the one that actually stays with you. I don't consent to you accessing my car's data or systems. If there's a specific power for this, please name it. Every clause is doing a job, the same way it has in every version of this sentence this channel has taught. Refusing consent closes off the easiest route into that data, a voluntary yes from you, the same way it closes off a search of the boot or the glove box in an earlier video. Asking for the power to be named puts the burden back where it belongs, on a genuine, articulable ground, not a request made simply because most people don't know to ask. And the honest fork, because this channel never pretends a phrase alone stops a properly grounded power. If police have genuine reasonable suspicion tied to a specific offense, or a warrant authorizing exactly this kind of extraction, your refusal doesn't block a lawful search. The same principle that's run through every stop this channel has covered. What it does is make sure that whatever happens next happens because a real power was named and exercised, not because you handed it over by staying quiet and assuming the request was routine. A word specifically about rental and shared vehicles, because this risk isn't limited to cars you own. If you've ever paired your phone to a rental car for a road trip, that pairing doesn't necessarily disappear when you hand the keys back at the counter. Vehicle forensics researchers have documented cases where a single rental car retained synced phone data from dozens of previous renters, all recoverable by anyone with the right tool plugged into that same dashboard. If you rent a car, treat the sync prompt exactly the same way you would in your own vehicle. Decline it unless you genuinely need the feature, and if you do sync, clear it before you return the keys. On the data broker side specifically, Australia hasn't yet produced a single case as widely reported as the American story involving General Motors and its insurance data pipeline. But the underlying mechanics are the same regulatory gap, running through the same kind of permitted disclosure clauses this video has already walked through. Consumer advocacy groups and privacy researchers have raised repeated concerns about connected vehicle data flowing from manufacturers to third parties in Australia with limited visibility for the driver, and the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner has flagged connected car data as an emerging area of concern in its own guidance. The absence of one dramatic, fully reported case doesn't mean the pipeline isn't there. It means fewer journalists have gone looking for it yet, in the way Kashmir Hill did in the United States. Now the version of this that doesn't end quietly, because a channel that only shows the easy outcome isn't preparing you for the real one. Same opening. An officer gestures toward the dash, just routine. Mind if I plug this in? You decline, calm. I don't consent to you accessing my car's data or systems. If there's a specific power for this, please name it. Instead of moving on, he presses. It'll go a lot faster if you just let me. You don't match the pressure. Same words, same level. I understand, officer. I still don't consent, and I'd like that power named before anything's connected. If a genuine ground exists, a warrant or reasonable suspicion tied to a specific offense he can point to, that changes what's compellable. The same fork that's run through every stop this channel has covered. If nothing gets named, the conversation typically ends there, because a declined request, on its own, was never going to manufacture a power that didn't already exist. A genuine state-by-state note, because the search powers sitting underneath this issue aren't identical everywhere. What you've heard tonight reflects the general LEPRA framework used in New South Wales for vehicle searches, layered against the Federal Privacy Act, which applies nationwide regardless of which state you're in. Victoria and Queensland run their own vehicle search powers under their own legislation, with the same core reasonable suspicion threshold this channel has covered in earlier videos, but different section numbers. The Privacy Act protections and the OAIC's role as regulator apply the same way across the entire country, because privacy law in Australia operates federally, even where search powers themselves are state-based. One last practical habit, separate from the settings and the sentence. If an officer ever does access your car's data, ask for and note the specific power relied on, the time, and whether a warrant number was provided, as close to the moment as you safely can. The same principle that's run through every video on this channel applies here too. Specific, checkable facts protect you far better after the fact than a general impression that something felt like it went too far. Mind if I plug this in? Just routine. You, calm. I don't consent to you accessing my car's data or systems. If there's a specific power for this, please name it. A pause. If nothing further happens, that's the exchange doing exactly what it's built to do. You've declined the easy route without a fight, and nothing about declining, on its own, becomes grounds for anything more. Picture it clean. An officer, mid-conversation at a stop, gestures toward your dash. Mind if I plug this in? Just routine. You, calm. I don't consent to you accessing my car's data or systems. If there's a specific power for this, please name it. A pause. If nothing further happens, that's the exchange doing exactly what it's built to do. You've declined the easy route without a fight, and nothing about declining, on its own, becomes grounds for anything more. To close it out, your car is one of the most detailed tracking devices you've ever owned, and you paid for it yourself. It records where you go. The maker can lawfully share it with police under a Privacy Act exception most drivers have never read, and a real extraction tool already used by Australian police can pull data out of your dashboard that your locked phone was never protecting in the first place. Tonight, check your settings, request your data, clear what's paired to the car, and if anyone ever wants to access that data at the roadside, you know the words, I don't consent, name the power. This is general information, not legal advice, and search powers around digital data specifically remain an unsettled area of Australian law that varies by state. If a request goes further than a conversation, the video ends and a lawyer begins. Legal aid exists in every state. Share this with whoever's ever traded in a car without wiping it first. Tell me in the comments, did you know your car might still be holding a copy of your old contacts and messages? Subscribe for the next stop, because next time, it isn't your car's memory they're asking about. It's the phone in your pocket. That video's coming next.